This is the On the Pony Express podcast, hosted by Billy Embody, brought to you by Epic Estate Wines. Walking strong on the Pony Express, a weekly segment with SMU alum, owner, vintner of Epic Estate Wines, Bill Armstrong. Epic Estate Wines, world-class wines from Paso Robles wine country. Learn more, Epic, EPOCH, epicwines.com. And now your host. Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let we go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to a live recording of the Walking Strong podcast. I am Billy Embody, and with me is Bill Armstrong, and I'm going to let it fly on our special guest tonight.
Oh, I love it. I'm not going to let it fly on David Miller. Are you kidding me? Hey, listen, I am so excited that y'all are all here tonight because this is the first time this has ever been done, and that is a wine tasting at Armstrong Fieldhouse. And that is thrilling for me to share my wines with all of y'all. Let's talk about what I call the roller coaster ride. From obscurity to the ACC in 18 months. And so I want to introduce David, who needs no introduction here at SMU. David graduated from SMU in 1972. He is a local boy, Richland High School, and he got a full ride scholarship to SMU. He thought he was going to go to Texas Tech for a while there until they finally offered you a full ride, which, by the way, if you analyze that, that's probably the greatest return on investment in SMU's history.
Thank you.
So David graduated in '72. He was a center on the team, and they won the Southwest Conference Championship in 1972. He then graduated, and then he came here and got his MBA in 1973. He became ultimately an oil man. He was initially a banker. He went to work for Republic National Bank, and then left Republic in 1980, and then in 1986, I believe it was, or 88, he formed Energy Capital. He calls it NCAP, which is one of the top 20 private equity firms ever created. It's by far and away the number one private equity firm in the energy space, which is what my main business is. They've raised and invested over $43 billion, started 275 different companies with that, and truly is one of the most successful alums in the history of SMU. He's now the chairman of the board of SMU, joined the board 16 years ago, and he's now the chairman of the board. And he's Dallas Business Hall of Fame, Rocky Mountain Oil and Gas Hall of Fame, Oil and Gas Investor Magazine Hall of Fame, member of the the National Petroleum Council. I should know that because I'm on that too. Did I say Republican? Was that a Freudian there?
That's okay.
He's got 5 children, a great wife, 13 grandchildren, and he has donated over $100 million to SMU. So that is his brief bio. I could go on and on, but let's talk about our journey into the ACC. And I want to put you back in time just a little bit. So 2021, the shit started hitting the fan, if you want to look at it from SMU's viewpoint, actually in college football's viewpoint. UT and OU started this whole conference realignment, and they moved from the Big 12 into the SEC. That was also the time that Sonny Dykes decided to trade up, and he thought, by going to TCU, crosstown rival. And that particularly hurt David and I because we actually believed what he said. I will tell you a little side story. When he called to break up with me, this is on November of 21, Liz was there. She was sitting next to me in bed, and he called and was clearly into his wine or whatever he was drinking that night, and said a bunch of stuff that he probably wished he could take back. And I finally, at the very end of the call, I said, listen, Sonny, this is tough, really hard for me, but promise me this one thing. If you go to TCU, you got to help us get into the Big 12. And if you can do that, all is forgiven. And he said, oh, Bill, absolutely. You know I love SMU. Once a liar, always a liar. Right to the end, all the way to the bitter end. But we're not going to talk about that piece of crap anymore tonight. So and that's about the time I think David and I were starting to talk about we have really got to step up our game. Because it was in 2023, then all of a sudden the Big 12, they pick up BYU, who were playing on Friday. Then they pick up University of Houston, Cougar High, then Cincinnati and UCF. And we were blocked. We were blocked from getting into the Big 12 by ostensibly TCU and Baylor. And maybe to some degree Texas Tech. I don't know.
Not at that point.
Not at that point. Okay.
Yeah. That subsequently, after we really started our Power Conference initiative.
Right. And then, if you recall, then the American rapidly picked up Charlotte, UAB, UTSA, UNT, Rice. Anyway, it went from being a subprime conference to even worse. And no offense to the American, because, I mean, it is what it is. And college football is changing so much that it's a very, very, very volatile time in the history. And then, of course, we know what happened immediately thereafter. You know, you see USC and UCLA jump to the Big Ten. And then that's when our story starts really getting involved. So I'm going to let David start because I have to say that wasn't for David Miller, there was no way we would be in the ACC. No way. So, David, where do you want to jump in?
Thanks, Bill. I've never had an introduction quite that glossy.
I left all the good shit on the floor. I could have really told him about your points per game, and
Yeah, and I do want to, start by saying that what Liz and Bill Armstrong have done for this university and this athletic program is just awesome. Maybe an overused word, but they're game changers. And so it's been a real joy for me to be partners in crime with them, if you will, as we work to try to move SMU to even higher levels. So, the day we got the announcement, many of you were in the crowd. I stepped up to the podium and my first words were, "We're back where we belong." And that's a fact. This university had an incredibly rich and deep and storied athletic history prior to the death penalty. We kind of got lost in the woods for maybe several decades, but I felt very strong.
3.5 decades, if I recall. Not that I'm counting.
And I've been on the board, as you said, 15 years. You've been on the board almost 12, a decade 12, 13, or over a decade. Yeah. And I would tell you that that's when the change really started. And the change was fundamentally about really being committed to athletic success. And that manifests itself in a lot of different ways. You know, this facility, the way we compensate our coaches, the programs we have in place to support our student athletes, et cetera. And we started to do the things that frankly look like a power conference school. Okay. And so I felt like, and Bill's correct, I mean, really the real triggers were getting left out when the Big 12 chose to take those 4 schools. And then even more so, I'll tell you, when Sonny left. And Sonny Dykes left not over money. It had nothing to do with money because we had agreed to match whatever their offer was from a compensation standpoint. But he was not convinced at that point in time that we were doing the things necessary to gain power conference status. And so, I was not.
And can I add there, David, I don't mean to interrupt you, but when he was approached by TCU, they said to him, there is no way SMU is ever getting into the Big 12 because we're going to prevent them from getting into the Big 12.
Yeah, and I grew up in Fort Worth, had the opportunity to go to TCU, didn't want to be a Horned Frog, I always wanted to be a Mustang. But if I'm TCU or Baylor, I frankly would have made the same decision. I mean, why would you do anything that elevates SMU's status from a competitive standpoint? So I don't like it. I get it. Although I will say to you that it frankly worked to our good fortune, because when we first started this process, we privately, Gerald and I in particular, said from day one, if we ever had the good fortune of having a choice, our choice would be the ACC. And that was about, being connected with, I'm not going to name the schools, but other high academic schools. As Richard Ware says, we've joined our aspirant schools. Let's get back to a little history. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that would be good. Before you just actually reminded me of something I wanted to say before I gave you the mic. And that is, David and I have taken on this athletics project getting into the ACC because it's not just about athletics, but it's really about the entire university. Because we want SMU to be the go-to university in the country, academically, culturally, spiritually, athletically. And he and I have always agreed on that. And that's the reason that I give a lot of my money to non-athletic things. David, we're opening up the new David Miller Business School. It's all about getting SMU to the top. But we both agree that with athletics, we get to the top so much faster. And frankly, I want to be Stanford or Duke without all the wokeness. Frankly.
Yeah, and so along with I mentioned commitment was certainly at the board level was a change of our mindset, and the mindset being that athletic success would propel this university forward, not just athletically but academically, and that how many great academic universities are there in the country that have very, very strong athletic programs, and it took time to kind of move that aircraft carrier, if you will. But we did, and I will share with you today that our provost, every one of our deans, I think we have 8 academic units here or schools, have approached me and thanked me for the ACC and said, thank you for helping us attract better quality faculty and higher quality students. So, and I think you would all agree, we've yet to play a game against an ACC opponent. And this university 12 months after the invitation to join the ACC is already perceived differently in the national landscape. Okay, so, and it's only going to get better. So let's go back, and because you did ask me to share some history here, did you not?
I would love any dirty stories or whatever you might have down in the weeds, because that's the color of all this.
And some of it, I see my friend Chris Rensel out here. He's already heard this story, but so we decided, look, we've got a great story to tell. We just need to be a whole lot more proactive about it. And great story to tell around SMU, great story to tell around Dallas, etc. And so we launched something, frankly, called the Power Conference Task Force, which was a subset of the Board of Trustees. I think there are probably a dozen to 15 of us, and started to meet and talk about what I call the Power Conference Initiative. And one of the very first things we did, well, let me back up. We knew that, frankly, one of our weak points is what you would call media value. And that's fundamentally why we got left out of the Big 12 when they invited those 4 schools. If you look back at our TV viewership, look at attendance at our football games and our basketball games, we just simply didn't have the media value to be able to come into a league and be accretive. That's a financial term, but so having said that, the DFW media market is attractive and something we worked really hard to sell. All right, so we launched this Power Conference Initiative. We decide on day one we have to have a high-powered media consultant to help us with that process. And so we hired a firm out of Los Angeles that had negotiated 4 of the 5 Power 5 conference TV contracts, had negotiated the CFP contract, so very helpful to us. But then we also hired a guy named Oliver Luck. You guys have all heard that name. Was a West Virginia athletic director. He was the number 2 guy at the NCAA, I think, for 8 to 10 years. Was CEO of the XFL, maybe when it existed, but just he is absolutely wired within the university athletic community. And he, more particularly, was a consultant to the Big 12 when they added those 4 schools. So he had a seat at the table. He knew what the dynamics were. And so we hired him as a consultant to the athletic department. And we started a process of getting out and telling the story. And so Gerald Turner, and by the way, we felt like from day one that we potentially could be a candidate to join the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the ACC, never the SEC or the Big 10. SMU is not a fit.
But let me mention in there, geographically, it was Big 12, all of it. Because, I mean, we're in conference, blah, blah. Pick was Pac-12 because I knew we were going to be blocked by the guys down the road in Baylor. And the ACC, I think at this point in time, was the long shot. But culturally, we're a lot more like Duke, Miami, Wake Forest, et cetera.
Well, and look, the reshuffling, reconfiguration, if you will, generally is triggered by renegotiation of their TV contracts. So you had the Pac-12 that was headed into that process, had the Big 12 headed into that process. ACC contract runs through 2036. But Oliver actually and our media consultant both said, hey, don't forget about the ACC. If they want to survive, they're going to have a national footprint. And SMU, because of our academic profile, would be attracted to the ACC. So anyway, so we launched this effort and decide that we need to promote SMU. We need to, with both presidents, or not both, but our presidents cast the votes in every university. That's the way it works. So Gerald Turner started picking up the phone literally and calling the presidents of the universities in all three of those conferences. And he knew some of them. He didn't know all of them. And so you can imagine that was, I don't think it was an easy process for him in the beginning to pick up a phone. I'm used to it as a private equity guy raising money. But no one tells the SMU story any better than Gerald Turner does. So that was we came up with this protocol that he would approach and communicate with the presidents. Rick Hart would interface with the athletic directors, and I would spend all my time focused on my contemporaries at other universities, at the board chairs, who are going to be in the university president's ears, as well as important athletic influencers, guys like this that are huge donors to athletics. So I'm not trying to make this about me, but I literally got on. I have the good fortune of owning an airplane, and I just crisscrossed the country. Far better to have a face-to-face meeting with people than a phone call if you can get them to do it. And I went to at least 20 cities and had meetings with individuals that are in the same role I'm in, and frankly encountered a very receptive audience. A lot of people had a very favorable opinion of SMU, but I learned very quickly that no conference, nor any school was going to support anything that would be in the least bit financially dilutive. That's the term. Okay. And we didn't have enough media value to compel the ESPNs of the world to increase the conference's contract. You follow me? Okay. So, again, a receptive audience, a lot of things about SMU, the city of Dallas that were hugely attractive. You kind of knew that, hey, they'd like to have a presence in this marketplace. Okay. And there's no question that to the Pac-12 and the ACC, our academic profile was also attractive to them because the university presidents care about it. Other than the Big 12, and I asked the commissioner of the Big 12 one time, who had 3 or 4, face-to-face meetings with us. I said, so the academics count for you guys? He said, not really. This is your
That's why it's called the truck stop conference.
But it certainly counted for the presidents of Stanford, of Cal, USC, UCLA, and they were still in the league when we started the conversation, as well as many of the presidents and chancellors in the ACC. So we go down that path. I would tell you, good fortune, largely through Oliver Luck, to not only have conversations with board chairs and athletic influencers, but I start to have one-on-one conversations with the commissioner. And George Kleokoff was a Pac-12 commissioner. You guys will recall he came to Dallas with some of his lieutenants to do due diligence. And we had been absolutely assured that once they got their media deal done, the very next call they would make would be to SMU to invite us to join the Pac-12. Okay. Big 12, we're engaged with their commissioner. He at one point in time said to me, there's only one school in the country that it makes eminent sense for us to add. And he said, and that's SMU. And I was at a restaurant with him, I almost fell out of my chair. And I said, would you repeat that for me? So he repeats it. And he says, look, it's all about protecting our turf, which makes a ton of sense. You don't want the Pac-12 or the ACC coming in, right? And but then there's no question, I don't know all the details, but then the pushback from our neighbors got so strong that opportunity went away. In the meantime, we are deep in conversation with the ACC and made the decision that, hey, we've got to, this is honestly, it's a financial deal, okay? It was kind of clear to me and to us that we were attractive, but we had to do something that would incent them financially to add SMU. And so I say to people, I guess somewhat privately, but now publicly, we made a business deal. And the leadership of the university, from a governance standpoint, President Turner, were fully aware of what was going on along the way. And as you recall, there's been a lot of media coverage and attention about the fact that we so-called, made the agreement to forego participation in the media revenue stream for 9 years. I will tell you that it's hard to take the position that you gave up something that you never had. Okay. And furthermore, we're never going to get. And so we made a decision to make an investment to join what, you might think of as an expensive club. But I think it's the right thing for SMU to do in terms of the future of this university. And there was no argument about that. I love to tell a story about, she may pinch me, but Karen Prothrow, who's a former board chair of SMU, and I don't think she has the same passion about athletics that Bill and I have, but she's not negative about athletics. But we were in a meeting talking about this opportunity, and she voiced, raised her hand, and she said, "You know what? I view this. We're talking about the dollars necessary to be competitive in the ACC, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. All right, so it's a big number." But she said, "I view this as a transformational opportunity for this university. Very similar in my mind," this is Karen talking, "to the opportunity we had to have the Bush Center on the SMU campus." And some of you will recall, we had to raise, I think, $300 million. Yeah. That was part of the deal. We were in the midst of the last capital campaign, and Gerald and the leadership of the university were very much of the opinion that would not dilute our efforts to raise and so we had a very successful campaign, increased the goal. So we started out, I think we offered them that we wouldn't participate in the media revenue stream for 3 years. And then it became 5 years. And then it became 7 years. And so what's going on, let me back up and tell you, in the meantime, the Pac-12 implodes. Okay, so that opportunity, we're getting pushback from our neighbors, the Big 12, and the Pac-12 can't get their media deal done, so it implodes.
Let me add a little color to that, David. I'll never forget that day. I believe it was in August. And that morning, my phone blows up at practice. And they said, Pac-12 is inking a media deal with Apple. And the next phone call is to SMU and San Diego State to join the Pac-12. And we were high-fiving on the field. Remember that?
Texan,
yeah. And then an hour later, it turns out that the Pac-12 just completely implodes. Oregon and Washington go to the Big Ten, and then there goes Arizona State, Utah, CU, all to the Big 12. It just happened in a moment. It's one of those bad days where you're like,
but we thankfully had serious traction with the league that we wanted to join. Jim Phillips, who's the commissioner of the ACC, bouncing around here with you, but in my very first meeting with him, he said to me, I was in Los Angeles for the national championship game. We met privately in a hotel room. And he said, I'm not just familiar with SMU's last 30-year athletic history. He said, I'm familiar with SMU's 100-year athletic history. And he was a supporter from day one. And he had a lot of presidents that were of the same mindset. But he was fighting, I shouldn't say fighting, he was in a difficult negotiation with Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina, and North Carolina State, who had joined hands over how they slice up the revenue pie. And he had come up with something he called the Success Initiative that was going to reward the schools that played in football bowl games, schools that played in the NCAA tournament disproportionately. And trying to figure out a way to please the big dogs in football was becoming more and more difficult. We learned through our media consultant that the ACC had embedded in their contract with ESPN the ability to add schools, expand, without ESPN's approval. And for every school they added, they got an incremental $30 million a year. Okay, so here's the essence of the financial deal. Our willingness to forego, if you will, that $30 million, which again, I'm going to tell you, we didn't have and we're never going to get, became the primary source of revenue for the so-called success pool. Okay? And so you got these university presidents that are going to cast the vote. They like SMU. They're very, attracted to having a presence in the Dallas market. And now all of a sudden they have pretty serious financial incentive. So is that's
a great summary. There's one last part that I think this gets back to the roller coaster ride. We were going to go to the Pac-12. Now we're getting into the ACC, but we're blocked by NC State, UNC, Clemson, and Florida State.
Right.
And tell us how you got the NC State to flip.
Yeah. And we had been told at different points along the way, who the schools were that were supportive, who some of the schools were that weren't supportive. And by the way, in every conversation I had with the Florida State board chair, with the Clemson board chair, with the North Carolina board chair, they said, hey, this has nothing to do with SMU. We like SMU, or we love SMU. I'm talking about those board chairs. It's all about, we're using this as leverage in our negotiation with the conference about how revenues get split. Okay. But so all of a sudden, and Philip said this from the beginning, he said, I will never, ever ask for a vote or call a vote unless I think I have the votes. So think about it. So the Pac-12's imploded, the Big 12's pushing back, and all of a sudden he does a straw poll and it takes 75% vote and he's got 11. And so Clemson, Florida State, North Carolina State, and North Carolina are negative votes. I'm in Whitefish on vacation last summer. And some of you guys know Kirk Reimer is a good friend, and he's got a home in Whitefish. And so we get together and have coffee one morning. We're about to leave. And he said, I was just with the North Carolina State board chair in Aspen last week. And I said, you're kidding me. Because we had gotten no traction with North. I'd never been able to get the guy to return my phone call. And I don't think Gerald had been able to interact with the North Carolina State Chancellor. So we really hadn't had the opportunity to communicate with him. I said, well, I need an introduction. And so he said, easy deal. So he texts, the gentleman's name is Ed Weisiger, and said, David Miller, our board chair, would like to have a conversation with you. So that afternoon we talked. And I explained to him in detail what our financial deal was. And I said, are you guys, you know the details? He said, I've heard from our chancellor, who, by the way, is in Europe at the time, that you guys had made an interesting offer. He said, I don't think there's anywhere in the world that he knows, the magnitude of what you're proposing here. He said, I talked to him 2 or 3 times a day about expansion. He said, I'll be on the phone with him tonight. So sure enough, the next day he calls me back and he said, well, I spoke to our chancellor, and he said, and he was not aware of the details, which is odd. And he said, that's a game changer. That's a head turn. That's what the chancellor said. And so all of a sudden we think, well, there's potential, and we didn't know whether North Carolina State and North Carolina would split. where they were joined at the hip. But sure enough, I got a call from another dear friend from a Wake Forest trustee who's wired athletically, a guy named Ben Sutton. He said, North Carolina State's going to flip. And they're going to, Phillips is going to call a vote of all the presidents in the morning at 7 a.m. Eastern time, 6 a.m. Pacific time. So I'm a sound sleeper, but I didn't sleep all that well that night. And so sure enough, at 6:20 a.m. the next morning, I got a call. The invitation to join the league came to directly to Gerald. And so our phone rings at 6:20, and Carol and I are up, and I'm already drinking coffee, and anyway, he lets me know that he just gotten the call from Jim Phillips. Gail Turner, by the way, is in the background. She's doing a cheer. And it was just, really a jubilant time. And then last thing I'll share with you. So about 10 minutes later, I get a call from Kenny Bunkport, and it's President Bush. And he said, news has made it all the way up to Kenny Bunkport that SMU's just gotten an invitation to join the ACC, and congratulated us. So high time. Thanks for letting me share that story.
That was great. That was a great story. There's a little bit of other little bumps on the road. I mean, at that ACC time, they were going to expand, and all of a sudden they were going to expand to maybe Cal and Stanford and not SMU. I mean, there was it was just kind of bumpy. Where one thing I've learned in this process is, number one, money drives everything. I hate to admit that. You would think it would be culture, or geography, or something else, rivalry, etc. No, it's all about money, A. And B, don't ever believe anything you read by a sports columnist, because nobody has any idea what's going on. I mean, I would wake up and get into a bad mood about something that The Athletic wrote, or something that Sports Illustrated said, or whatever, and they have no idea. They're just, planted stories, fake news.
That's how they make a living.
Yeah.
And there was just enormous speculation that was unfounded throughout the entire process.
Well, it's going to totally change SMU. As a basketball guy, you want to talk to us? What do you think about getting into ACC basketball?
Of course, I'm thrilled, but I've become a huge football fan. I mean, I've always loved SMU football, but I've loved SMU basketball probably a little more. But have become good friends with Brett and love what he's doing. And look, while I'm a former basketball player, love basketball. As we made the tour and had all these encounters with the different universities and with the presidents and the conference commissioners, et cetera, they said very, very clearly, it's 80% football, 20% basketball. And the other sports, by the way, don't count. Seriously. And so, therein lies part of the reason I'm such a passionate football fan now. But to your question, the level of competition for both football and basketball is going to be much more keen. And this is such a huge, huge opportunity, again, this redundant, but for this university, not just athletically, but overall, if we do this successfully, it will catapult the brand, SMU's national brand. So, and therefore we can't afford to go into the ACC and languish in football or basketball. Clearly the football program is on the right trajectory, and Brett's done an incredible job in managing the transfer portal, NIL, et cetera. And, it resulted in our first conference championship in 40 years.
Yeah.
We felt like that from a basketball standpoint that we needed to upgrade the program. So we made a change, which is you're all familiar with. And then we started the search process for a new basketball coach. And I was shocked with the level of interest. I mean, we had sitting big time power conference basketball coaches that were highly attractive to this job. Without naming names, but I will share with you that I'd gotten to know Andy Enfield, Ed Wilson, another former trustee name that you guys know, on a couple of trips to Los Angeles. Got to play golf with Andy 2 times at Bel Air Country Club, and you've read about his track record, if you will. I mean, he's a big time college basketball coach, phenomenal recruiter. USC was in the Elite Eight literally 3 years ago. And so he immediately became our target. We heard that he potentially could be interested in the job. And we frankly never veered off course and were able to successfully attract him to Dallas and SMU. He did say to me, and I'll close with this about basketball. He said, "Look, I hear you, you're saying that you want to be competitive in the ACC, successful in the ACC." He said, I have no interest in the job unless you tell me I'm going to have the resources to be competitive with North Carolina, Duke, and UVA. And so we gave him that assurance.
How closely do you follow? How closely do you follow recruiting? Are you a recruit, Nick? Do you eat it up here? You have the closest access that you can have, especially in the basketball program. Are you living and dying like some of the fans out there are about, hey, this recruit's here or that recruit, we've got an opportunity to get? How closely do you look at that type of thing when you're following?
Is Rhett still here? I don't think he is. I don't follow it as closely as this guy does, but I do. I probably look at On3 and 247 Sports and Rivals every day. It's important, and it's been fascinating to watch, but it's been thrilling to see us go from recruiting guys that had offers from North Texas and the Air Force Academy and Louisiana Tech to now, both in football and basketball, recruiting, players that have numerous power conference offers. It's great, and it's what we've got to have, obviously, to be competitive in the league we just entered.
I totally agree with that, and I could tell a similar story about recruiting Rhett that you did, Andy. When Sonny, I will never leave you in my life, Dykes decided to leave, I knew within a moment that I knew who I wanted to hire as our football coach, and it was Rhett, and that's worked out really well. He's doing a fabulous job.
Wow, that was so special. Thank you, David, for being here. Really appreciate all the time you gave and all the insight to the long, winding journey out of the desert that SMU spent its last 40 years in. And it's an incredible time to be here, and it was an incredible evening with you. And Bill, thank you so much for putting this on. You and Liz do so many great things for this university as well, and continue to support Epic Wines, everyone. EpicWines.com/Pony. Get a Pony Express case. We'll be breaking them all down on the Pony, on the Walking Strong podcast every week this season. We'll have a fresh episode out that we just filmed this right before this live recording. So this has been a really special evening. I really appreciate everybody who made the time to be here. This has been incredibly insightful for me, getting to sit down. We were in Bill's church, I guess, in New Orleans in December, and you were sitting back there on the couch, and we were just kind of hoping one day we'd get this opportunity. So we really appreciate the time, David. And
Wild year.
It's been a wild year.
It's been a wild year.
So here's to a big win on Friday. If you guys want to talk to the Epic staff about getting on with the Pony Express case or ordering a bottle, please reach out to them. And there are QR codes on the table as well. Got to shamelessly plug the website on theponyexpress.com. So sign up today if you're not already. But thank you guys for coming. It's been a blast. And for another edition of Walking Strong, David Miller, Bill Armstrong, I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to OnThePonyExpress.com for more coverage.